Hey folks, my name is Dennis, and today we're going to be wrapping up this series on Japanese internment here in the United States during World War II. If you haven't seen my first two videos on the mostly unspoken history of Santa Anita Park, the famous racetrack, and the No-No Boys, then please go check out those. The links will be in the description. Just like in my previous videos, I'm going to give the heads up that I'm going to be using the terms internee, prisoner, and interned mostly interchangeably, as well as the terms internment camp and concentration camp. These definitions are basically exactly the same, and by making any sort of distinction between them, it sort of muddies the waters and makes it look like it was a lot less bad than it actually was. And trust me, if you've seen these last two videos, then you'd know that internment of the Japanese wasn't that great. Today's video will be about Fred Korematsu, the man who successfully was able to sue the United States over the issue of internment. Korematsu was born on January 30th, 1919 to Japanese nursery owners in Oakland, California, giving him the generational designation as Nisei, meaning he was an American-born Japanese person. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, Korematsu lost his job as a ship welder. His family was rounded up and sent to Tanforan Assembly Center in 1942, but Korematsu stayed behind, hiding with his Italian-American girlfriend. He underwent minor plastic surgery to make his eyes appear more European and changed his name to Clyde Serra, claiming that he was Spanish and Hawaiian. I'm not going to get into very deeply here, but there were very disgusting articles like How to Tell Japs from Chinese printed in Life magazine. Yes, that Life magazine. Basically, it was a way for you to pull out some kind of caliper and measure the eyes and the skulls of your neighbors. Socialist feminist Nellie Wong's poem Can't Tell is a very good example of the tension felt by non-Japanese Asians at the time here in California. Korematsu was eventually arrested on the streets of San Laredo, California, and taken to San Francisco County Jail. While in jail awaiting his trial, he met Ernest Bessig, the director of the San Francisco American Civil Liberties Union office. Bessig approached Korematsu with the offer of being a test trial to challenge the constitutionality of Executive Order 9066, the order that President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued, which resulted in the arrest of many Japanese people. Korematsu was convicted in federal court on September 8, 1942, and was placed on a 5-year probation. He was then transferred to Tanforan Assembly Center, which also happened to be a former racetrack just like Santa Anita, a little telling about how the military really viewed the lives and humanity of the Japanese people. Later, he and the rest of his family were sent to Topaz, Utah to spend out the remainder of their internment. Fred Korematsu pushed his suit to the Supreme Court, which they ruled against in a 6-3 ruling, saying that the incarcerations were a military necessity and were not racially motivated. His biography quotes Justice Robert Jackson. The court for all times has validated the principle of racial discrimination. The principle then lies about like a loaded weapon, ready for the hand of any authority that can bring forward a plausible claim of an urgent need. After he and other Japanese were released from concentration camps, he attempted to live life normally. It should be noted that Japanese internment ended because of a lawsuit against the United States by Mitsue Endo. Endo was chosen to be the plaintiff of this lawsuit, which was organized by the Japanese American Citizens League and attorney James C. Purcell. Korematsu moved to Detroit. Many Japanese people moved either to the East Coast, the Midwest, and even farther south into Mexico, where there was not as much anti-Japanese sentiment. In Michigan, he also met his future wife, Catherine, who was a student at Wayne State University. Marriage for them was possible because, unlike California, his home state, or South Carolina, her home state, interracial marriage actually wasn't illegal in Michigan. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter appointed a special commission to conduct a federal review of the facts surrounding the internment of Japanese people during World War II as a result of Executive Order 9066. This commission was the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. They came to the conclusion that the imprisonment of Japanese people during World War II was because of race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. Yeah, FDR was a political failure. Don't hear that one very often. Around this time, political science professor Peter Irons and attorney Aiko Herzig Hoshinaga were doing their own research on the subject of Japanese internment. While searching through government archives, they stumbled upon a gold mine of knowledge. Hidden amongst many federal documents were memos from the U.S. Justice Department attorney Edward Ennis, written between 1943 and 1944. Ennis had sought to find some sort of military need to incarcerate the Japanese people and actually found the opposite. J. Edgar Hoover, yes, that bad guy, denied that the Japanese Americans committed any wrongdoing. These reports were not presented to the Supreme Court back in the 40s and were suppressed. Supposedly, one of them was even burned to destroy the evidence. It was based on this evidence that a pro bono legal team, including lawyers from the Asian Law Caucus, reopened Korematsu's case in 1983. During the litigation, the Justice Department offered Korematsu a pardon if he would agree to drop the suit. He rejected the pardon and the trial moved forward. On the subject of the pardon, his wife Catherine said, "Fred was not interested in a pardon from the government. Instead, he always felt that it was the government who should seek a pardon from him and from Japanese Americans for the wrong that was committed." Korematsu's conviction was overturned on November 10, 1983 by Judge Merrill Hall Patel of the U.S. District Court of Northern California in San Francisco. Despite this, the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling from 1944 still stands, and it would require a similar test case like a mass incarceration of another ethnic group to challenge the decision. Gee, I wonder where we're gonna find one of those. Thanks, Obama. During the trial, Fred Korematsu stood in front of Judge Patel and stated, "According to the Supreme Court decision regarding my case, being an American citizen was not enough. They say you have to look like one. Otherwise they can say you can't tell the difference between a loyal and a disloyal American. I thought that this decision was wrong, and I still feel that way. As long as my record stands in federal court, any American citizen can be held in prison or concentration camps without a trial or hearing. That is, if they look like the enemy of our country. Therefore, I would like to see the government admit that they were wrong and do something about it so this will never happen again to any American citizen of any race, creed, or color." Fred was not finished fighting after his case, though, and he continued to seek justice. He became an active member of the National Coalition of Redress and Reparations. He helped to lobby for the passage of a bill that would grant a formal apology for incarceration by the federal government and reward $20,000 to the surviving Japanese that were interned. President Ronald Reagan initially opposed the bill, which comes to no shock at all, although he did finally break due to political pressure. But seriously, fuck Reagan. This might have been the only good thing that he ever actually did, though. On August 10, 1988, he signed the Redress and Reparations into law. Korematsu received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Bill Clinton and continued speaking tours afterwards. Then 9/11 happened, and guess what? Korematsu still had to speak. He filed a friend of the court amicus brief for 2 Muslim prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, Shafiq Rasul v. George W. Bush and Khalid A.F. al-Oda versus United States of America. Korematsu said in a brief that the government's national security measures looked very similar to the military necessities of the past. Sadly, Korematsu died on March 30, 2005 due to respiratory failure. However, his legacy lives on. Now, on January 30, the states of California, Hawaii, Virginia, and Florida celebrate Fred Korematsu Day. That's today. This day is the first day in American history to be named after an Asian American and is a day to reflect on the civil liberties here in the United States. And seeing as there are literally Japanese Americans who lived in internment camps fighting against incarceration of Muslims and Latinx people, it is clearly a day that we need. That's gonna do it for me today. I want to thank some of my donors, Abby, Nicholas, and Psychic Dolphin Garage. And of course, I can't forget Cool Kid Jorge. Jorge donates at the $6.66 level on my Patreon, which gets him this really cool little devil drawing. If you'd like to support the channel and be like these lovely folks, you could be a monthly donor via Patreon. If you're unable to make a sustaining donation, please consider making a one-time donation on Ko-fi. Of course, if you can't do that as well, which I totally understand, just like, share, and subscribe. Now, Fred Korematsu, my friend, it is heartbreaking to know that you lived long enough to see the mass incarceration of another group of people because of their race or their religion. We're gonna keep fighting to make sure that all people are free. And to you, my lovely audience, happy Fred Korematsu Day. And take care. And goodbye.